again, I'm sorry, I'm late. The welcome, we're having our annual Utah movie night tonight, which has become a little bit of a tradition, and this is fun. And we've got the expert to guide us through and find us the right movies. And so this is really fun. And this is as good as we could do this year with what we face in the world. So we're going to do this and we'll see how it works. And I think it's going to work fine. We did kind of a dry run a few days ago and it seemed to work okay. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. Few announcements. James Bizel passed away in April. He's a longtime member of Utah Westerners. If you missed that, his obituary is in the newsletter. Steve Berlin included that. Not fun to have that. Last month, I introduced Jeff Nichols, briefly new member. This month looks like we have Lisa Michelle here. Lisa, nice to see you. Thank you. There's a nice little bio of Lisa, very accomplished person, woman, lawyer, government servant, and wonderful historian who will be a wonderful member, and be sure to read through that. Do we have any visitors tonight? You know, I think we've forgotten cool. What a nice thing. And Elaine Clark, what a nice thing. We have your application pending.
I have some visitors I can introduce.
Please.
Well, so Spence Kennard's with us. He's been with us to a meeting before.
Wow.
And I have a friend named Jim Bond, who's with us now as well, a friend of mine from my mission, an old companion. And I invited one other person. I don't see him.
Scott,
I have those two visitors.
Scott, why don't we have video from you?
Do you need video from me? I can do it. I think I can do it. Let's see. There I go. Okay.
You can see your guests.
Okay. There's me. I'm in a dark room, so.
There's a lot of people.
Spence and Kim, Tyler, do you want to introduce yourselves to the group? Say hi, Lee.
Thanks, Scott. I think a lot of the people know me. I've met them before. Several here are friends from long time, Mike and Richard and others. And so not a lot of introduction to say, just nice to be with you and appreciate the invitation to join again. Thank you.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Spence will have a little story he could tell about Olivia de Haviland, who he's met and he's become a friend with. I told Jim about it tonight.
Great to see you, Spence. Dan Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hard to believe that Olivia de Haviland's still alive, right, Jim? She's still alive?
104.
Yeah.
I haven't.
Maid Marian and whatever role she played in Gone with the Wind, and
Yes, the delightful Melanie.
yeah, right.
The Wind, a role that she campaigned for.
Are we going to still see that movie, Jim, in days ahead now with the Black Lives Matter issue, and they want to put that movie on the shelf?
Well, HBO said it's on the shelf temporarily, but when they show it again, it will have a wraparound by scholars, quote unquote, to give the movie context. As if we didn't know.
Yeah, right.
What possible context could they describe? Right, sure.
The treatment of blacks in
No, I'm kidding. Yeah.
Hollywood movies, as well as black performers. But the irony is that was the first film in which a black performer, Hattie McDaniel, received an Academy Award.
Yeah. Very cool, actually. Elaine, introduce yourself if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. My name is Elaine Clark. I'm a journalist by trade, and I guess a historian at heart, but mainly just when I can get Will Bagley to listen to my tales and wonders when I run into him downtown. This is my second Westerners meeting, actually. I was at another low back in August of 2015, I think, when there was a presentation about the POW, German POW massacre in Select.
Right.
So that was, a story that's definitely stuck with me and a great experience. And thank you guys very much for having me here tonight. I'm a big fan of Jim Dark anyway, so I'm happy to be here.
Oh,
Well,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Lisa, why don't you say hello? Go off mute and say hello to us.
Hi, I'm Lisa Michelle Church. I appreciate Ken sponsoring me. I've been able to present to you guys on the Arrowhead Highway a couple years ago, and with Susan Rue on the roadside motels. And
Yep.
right now I'm working on a history of women-owned beauty shops. So that's my
What a-
history stuff.
What a fun subject.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's great to have you here.
Great to be
Are
here.
there any other visitors with us tonight?
Well, this is Tyler Bond. I'm and was by invitation from Scott Snow.
Oh, cool. Sure. Please.
And I listened in last time, so I enjoy history, but I'm not a scholar and not very accomplished. In fact, my best accomplishment is I retired. So
That's an accomplishment I hope to attain someday. So,
Can I
Thank
have
you.
my husband, Matt Brown,
oh,
here?
cool.
We just
Kind
enjoy, we're pretending we're at the Alta Club. We just had dinner. I'm finishing mine, but
Oh,
we're
cool.
here together tonight.
Great. Thanks, Matt. It's nice to have you here.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Hi, Ken. This is Julie Warner.
Hi, Julie.
I'm here in the dark with Tom.
Yeah.
But Tom's sitting back here in the dark. We're waiting for moving. So
Great.
we're just sitting in a dark room.
Great. I have it all set up. I'm going to watch it on my big screen in the family room. So,
I'm sitting in a dark room
Here
too.
and listen to all of you.
I see Dennis to say there.
Yep.
absolutely. Okay, just a couple things. As usual, the newsletter edited by Steve Berlin is full of stuff that you should read. Be sure to take time to read it. Kurt Bench's review this month is of a new book about the women in the life and art of Charles M. Russell. There was a big exhibit in Scottsdale and up at the Russell Museum in Montana a couple years ago, and this was a follow-on book with that. He describes the importance of women in the art and life of Russell. Joe Hatch, Dr. Joe Hatch, has a fascinating short piece about the short-lived Morgan College of Medicine, which existed in the early 1880s for a couple of years in Morgan, Utah, of all places. I don't think of Utah as Morgan as a medical center place, Joe.
Well, it was for a couple of years, a year and a half.
What a great story. Steve also included fun columns from Will Bagley and Hal Schindler, and you need to go back and read them. There's lots of ways to widen your horizons, just even if all you do is read the newsletter. I somehow have the honor of introducing Jim Dark. It's a pleasure to introduce Jim. He's an amazing guy. He's a world-class authority on the history of film and movies and the world's greatest expert on films made in Utah. He served as the curator of BYU's Arts and Communications Archives, the BYU Motion Picture Archive, and the BYU Film Music Archive for 41 years until he retired a couple of years ago. He holds a PhD in film history from BYU, and I have no idea you could possibly have gotten to teach that. Did you just teach yourself and award yourself the degree, Jim?
I looked at myself in the mirror.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's anyone else who has that degree from that school had to have gotten it with Jim, and it's great. He also taught courses in film history at BYU for 30 years. If he had been teaching film history at BYU, I would have taken all his courses. Unfortunately, he and I overlapped a little bit at BYU, but he wasn't teaching there yet. he refers in his introduction to the people who've gotten to handle an Oscar in white gloves, and I'm one of those people. I think my friend Brad Westwood snuck me back into the back and pulled out a box, and I don't remember whose Oscar it was, but it was cool.
Could be the mill, maybe.
BYU has six Oscars, 6 Academy Awards.
Correct.
All of which I have no doubt were donated to BYU Special Collections through the work of Jim Dark. I believe, I will not soon forget and need to see again the vintage promotional film for the Utah Interurban that Jim showed us at Westerners a few years ago, which had amazing footage from the 1930s from Provo, or maybe even south of Provo, to Salt Lake. It's just, it was an extraordinary find for which I am very grateful that he showed us that. His acumen at convincing famous movie industry figures to donate not only Oscars, but also papers and films and storybooks and on is legendary. Much or all of the papers of the likes of Cecil B. DeMille, James Stewart, Lorraine Day, Max Steiner, Kenneth Darby, and many others are held at archives of BYU through Jim's extraordinary efforts. His When Hollywood Came to Utah is now in its 3rd revised edition, and everyone interested in Utah history should have at least one of the editions on their bookshelves. He's already supplied us with background and notes for the movie. Now he'll introduce the film. Then we'll all independently watch the film using the link that you should have gotten from Craig Smith on YouTube. Be sure to skip the ads as they come up. And then we'll come back, we'll have Jim introduce the film, and then we'll come back afterwards for a little bit more commentary and questions and answers, if that works for you. Dr. Dark. Dr. Dark, that's kind of cool. I like that. Dr. Dark sounds like a rapper.
But I can't cure a thing. Well, I think the most appropriate way to introduce the evening tonight is to pick a line of dialogue from a great movie. And Gloria Swanson's line from Sunset Boulevard. Hello, all of you out there in the dark. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. And I thought to introduce tonight's film by introducing the era in which it was released. This was released in May of 1958. And yet you'll find that The Proud Rebel is a very traditional kind of Western, even though it's situated in the Midwest. It's Western in many, many guises. But 58 was a very unusual year. The censorship code was not being followed strictly. All kinds of movies, some very daring, were produced during that year. So I thought I'd pick off about 6 or 8 movies that came out in 1958, just so you have an appreciation of where The Proud Rebel sits. For example, DeMille's last movie, The Buccaneer, starring Charlton Heston, was released that year. Stanley Kramer's film, The Defiant Ones, if you remember that one, with Tony Curtis, Sidney Poitier, about race relations. Elvis Presley, King of Rock and Roll, got on the screen with King Creole, a steamy adaptation of a William Faulkner story, The Long Hot Summer, starred Paul Newman and his wife, Joanne Woodward. Probably the best film Orson Welles ever made, according to contemporary critics, Touch of Evil, was released in 1958. Even Alfred Hitchcock had an entry in 1958. One of his most unusual films, Vertigo, about the sexual obsession by an older man, Jimmy Stewart of all people, for a younger woman, Kim Novak. And then there was the big, sprawling musical set during World War II, directed by Joshua Logan, South Pacific. So those are 6 or 7 films among the 400 released in 1958. But what about other Westerns? So the comparing apples and oranges. There were a lot of B movies, people out to movie theaters. The 50s were the greatest year, the most year, and the best year in which the greatest number of Westerns were made. Kinds of series, Westerns on television during that time. Audie Murphy. The big epic movie, Western, was The Big Country, starring Gregory Peck, Charlton Heston, and directed by William Wyler. So that is the movie environment against which tonight's film is set. Now, director Michael Curtiz, legendary in Hollywood. Casablanca, The Adventure, oh, I lost the Zoom.
Uh-oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can still see you too. You probably just need to touch a button and you'll be back.
There is no button to touch, but I will continue nevertheless.
We see you and we hear you.
Very good. Curtiz directed Yankee Doodle Dandy, Mildred Pierce, The Adventures of Robin Hood, that co-starred Olivia de Haviland, and one of the best directors of all time, although you may not have heard his name that often. Olivia de Haviland, she was 41 years old at the time this movie was made. Now, for a man, that doesn't matter much, but in Hollywood in those days, 41 years of age meant that an actress was on her way out, unless you were one of the big stars. And just as she was the gentle, soft, romantic interest of Errol Flynn in 8 of his movies, she could be a very tenacious, confident, even defiant character in movies. Now, as she is in this one, in her role as the single rancher, Lynette Moore. Now, how did she prepare herself for a role like that? Did anything happen in her life that would prepare her for being that confident, strong, and even demanding? Well, I'm going to talk about that at the end of the movie. It was a very important event in her life. I got a chance to interview Olivia de Haviland. I was just a punk, know-nothing 27-year-old. An opportunity to interview her in person at Warner Brothers in 1977 when she was making one of those gosh-awful disaster movies called The Swarm, about a plague of bees. But I got to interview Olivia de Haviland for an hour and a half, and I'll talk about that after the movie. Alan Ladd, he was 44 when The Proud Rebel was in production, but he looked older than that. He had a pretty rough life. He was a heavy drinker and a terrific actor. Best known as being a gangster in films such as This Gun for Hire, The Brasher Doubloon, and a whole host of others, often with Veronica Lake as co-star. But perhaps the film that people remember him most for is that quiet, soft-spoken, but skilled with a gun gunfighter, Shane.
Sure.
1953 Paramount movie directed by George Stevens. He takes that characterization into tonight's film in his role as John Chandler. A Confederate veteran returning just after the war in Illinois, looking for a doctor to take care of his mute son, who is played by his real life 11-year-old son, David, who had never been in a film before, never acted, and initially Alan Ladd turned down Michael Curtiz's request to have his son in this movie. After Alan Ladd started working with his son, he saw there was some real potential here. Well, he saw right, because his son won a coveted Golden Globe Award for his marvelous performance in this movie. Now, the landscape. Yep, the landscape is a major star in tonight's film, Utah. Right after the main title sequence, you will see John Chandler and his son David in a carriage, and they're on top of Cedar Mountain. That's why you don't see any mountains in the distance, so that it looks something like what they wanted Illinois to look like in post-Civil War 1860s. And they're in an area that is not far from present-day Highway 143 up there in the Dixie National Forest. How long it will be called Dixie National Forest, I'm not too sure, but I'll use that name right now. Then it connects to a scene where they're coming down a mountain and you see these beautiful Utah aspen trees. That's on a little lower elevation. And they confront veteran actor John Carradine, who was in a lot of John Ford movies, and he plays the role of a peddler. And John and his son ask Carradine for directions to get to Aberdeen, the little village of Aberdeen, Illinois, where they hear a doctor is who can treat young David. Then the scene immediately cuts to the village of Aberdeen. And what you see there is not Illinois, but you see the dressed up Western town built in Johnson Canyon, just 15, 20 miles east of Kanab, that was built in 1951, 6 years before, for another movie, and used dozens of times for Western films, as well as TV series such as God Will Travel, The Lone Ranger, and Gunsmoke. So you're going to have a lot of fun seeing Utah locations and a superb first-class film in The Proud Rebel. So enjoy. And then I'll see you at the end of the film to tell you what happened to all these actors and what was Olivia de Haviland like when I had the opportunity to interview her. So we'll see you then.
Thank you. Everybody, take your links to YouTube and let's watch the movie. Then we'll reconnect after.